When Joe Biden takes office next week, some of the first big changes he's going to make could come on the foreign policy front. At least that's what we're being told. The former vice president has promised quick actions to show, in his words, that America is back. Well, what exactly does that mean? Biden has already announced a series of key picks for his new government, drawing heavily from the Obama administration. In his most recent nomination, the president-elect named Samantha Power, the former U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, as his choice to lead the U.S. Agency for International Development, citing her deep experience addressing crises around the world. Our next guest says bringing back failed bureaucrats is not the right move for our foreign policy agenda. She joins now to discuss why. Here is senior policy analyst at GINSA, Erielle Davidson. Erielle, good to see you.
Thanks for having me, Buck. Always a pleasure.
Let's start with Samantha Power, shall we? Because people that remember the Obama administration will certainly know that one of her great contributions involved a little regime change effort in Libya. But tell me, what do you think about Samantha Power as the head of USAID? What does this mean for our country?
I'm pretty concerned, primarily because Sam Powers was a big fan of intervention in Syria, intervention in Libya, which was tremendously destabilizing. And Europe right now, unfortunately, and I'd say the United States as well, is still paying the price for that type of decision making, which is really short term. Sam Powers is very much an idealist. She sees human rights as her main priority, which I think, at surface level is highly commendable. But then when you get down into the nitty gritty of it, she's not really a realist when it comes to foreign policy and what is actually feasible in certain parts of the world. And because of that, she really has a short term outlook. And that's why when it came to regime change, she didn't really have a plan afterwards in either Syria or Libya. And so when I look at her as someone who's going to be taking over USAID, USAID is one of our most highly funded foreign policy tools. It's a development tool, but it's also something that we use in order to execute further on our foreign policy. What does it mean to have someone like Sam Powers at the helm? Well, that means she's going to take that same level of, I would say, broken idealism and put it at the helm of one of our most expensive foreign ventures. And so that to me is deeply concerning.
We've also got for Secretary of State Anthony Blinken, who had been Deputy Secretary of State before under Obama. I mean, really, the Biden administration foreign policy team seems to be a whole bunch of people who are getting promotions from their Obama period, which for a lot of us is interesting, Erielle, because I think one of the areas that was most difficult for the Obama administration to defend was actually on foreign policy. You look at places like Libya and Syria and Iraq and Afghanistan, and it was not good. Never mind China, which they effectively just allowed to continue to get away with all kinds of things that we are probably going to return to under Biden. What do we know about Tony Blinken?
Well, Blinken is one of those ones that could go either way, actually, Buck. So let's put it this way. The selection for Secretary of State could have been a lot worse. We could have been dealing with a Susan Rice. We could have been dealing with someone at the helm who would have been, I think, far more predictable, but in a bad way. I have a little bit of hope with Blinken in some ways because I do think that when it comes to Iran, he's at least open-minded in terms of other types of tools that we might use to bring the regime, to curb the regime itself. So when you look at the Obama bros, or when you look at the foreign policy guys who worked in the Obama administration, the vast majority of them, I would say, have heavy fealty to the Iran deal. And what does that translate into? It means that they think the Iran deal or the JCPOA is the only way to curb Iran's nuclear program. That's best case scenario. Blinken actually is someone, like I said, who I think is open or willing to look at other tools, foreign policy tools for curbing Iran. The biggest, I would say one of the biggest achievements of the Trump administration has been the maximum pressure campaign against Iran. Trump was able to come into office and say, you know what, the Iran deal, the JCPOA, it's not working. Tony Blinken is someone I think actually that I'm a little bit more optimistic about, but that doesn't say a whole lot, frankly.
Well, I want to I appreciate your fair-mindedness, but I would like to dash your optimism now by pointing out that under a Biden administration, we're going to have John Kerry as special envoy for climate or climate change. We all know he had been a senator, he ran for president, Secretary of State, loves the sound of his own voice. I feel like this This will be, there'll be a lot of comedy, but also a lot of sadness that results from this one.
You know, John Kerry is one of those people that has been wrong about almost every single initiative he's taken, and yet he still seems to be elevated to positions of power. He is a definition of falling upwards. You know, and I presume that in those meetings, he's going to be one of those people that's sitting there sort of pontificating about climate change when we're trying to deal with, you know, serious national security issues. That to me is deeply concerning, mostly because I think John Kerry is also someone who is not really willing to admit when he's made an error. Do you remember that video, Buck, that came out? I want to say it was in the around 2014. Was this perhaps.
There's no separate peace with the Palestinians. It must, or sorry, with the Arabs rather. It must go through the Palestinians. Oh, I remember that clip very well.
Yes, and so, you know, one of Kerry's biggest failures was essentially saying that we can't have peace in the Middle East unless Israel sorts out the Palestinian issue, unless we address the Palestinian issue. What the Trump administration has done is they flipped the order of operations. They said, no, you know, what we can do is try to foment or create some friendships in the Middle East, and then we'll deal with the Palestinian issue after. By reversing that order of operations, which John Kerry, mind you, said was virtually impossible, Trump has actually created, I would argue, a new Middle East. I mean, you're having Jewish weddings now in Dubai. That is Trump's Middle East. You would never see that happen if it weren't for the Trump administration. But going back to John Kerry, he's never once admitted that his foreign policy initiatives or his foreign policy outlooks were tremendously in error. And for me, at least, I think one of the signs of a smart, good politician or a smart, good leader is someone who can actually admit, you know what, someone on the other side has good ideas. And in fact, we're seeing that in practice right now. So what I find deeply concerning about Kerry is he has this sort of orthodoxy to his views that actually have been tried, tested, and failed.
Erielle Davidson, good to see you. Thanks for joining, sharing your expertise. Hey, Team Buck, just want to say thanks so much for watching The First on YouTube. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. And if you want to see more great content from The First, please click that subscribe button.